everything changed in a matter of seconds. I mean, think about it. One moment, you're looking at a roster that seems absolutely primed to conquer the world, and the very next, you are staring right down the barrel of a season where literally everything is on the line. Everything. The Pittsburgh Steelers of 2026, they are not just stepping onto the football field this year, they are walking a terrifying razor-thin tightrope over a sheer drop. It's a completely cinematic do-or-die scenario unfolding right before our eyes. We're talking about a legendary quarterback, a fractured, highly paid defense, and a championship window that is practically shattering under the immense weight of expectations. Welcome to this explainer right here on NFL Nexus. I'm your host, and today we are breaking down the incredibly tense, unprecedented reality facing this historic franchise. But hey, before we dive headfirst into this ticking clock, please remember to subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and comment your thoughts down below. Support the channel by becoming a channel member. We literally rely on viewers exactly like you who love this kind of deep, structured analysis. Okay, let's get into it. Let's look at the absolute boiling point this team has reached. So here is the million-dollar question. Actually, considering the salary cap, it's more like a multi-hundred-million-dollar question. In Pittsburgh, the margin for error has completely vanished. So we have to ask, can an aging MVP and a desperate defense win it all? Look at the offensive side of the ball. You've got Aaron Rodgers, a multi-time MVP who, let's be real, still has unparalleled vision. He still has absolute magic in his right arm. But he is unequivocally, undeniably battling father time. You just can't ignore the physical toll of spending decades in the pocket. It catches up to everyone. Now he's reunited with head coach Mike McCarthy. We know this duo, right? A duo that knows exactly what it takes to navigate a grueling, brutal playoff run and hoist a Lombardi trophy. We saw them do it back in Green Bay. But here's the catch. An aging MVP, no matter how legendary, and a veteran head coach, that's only half of the equation. The real anxiety, the real desperate reality for this entire franchise lies on the other side of the ball. Because you and I both know you cannot win a modern Super Bowl without a defense that can absolutely suffocate elite opponents in January. And right now, this Pittsburgh defense is a unit shrouded in heavy, suffocating doubt. Section 1. The final ride begins. This 2026 season, it is a ticking clock for a highly priced defense. And we need to talk about the money, because let's face it, the financial architecture of this roster dictates absolutely everything. Yes, Aaron Rodgers having something left in the tank is crucial, obviously. Yes, the offense potentially taking a massive step forward under Mike McCarthy with a retooled scheme is a huge factor, but the undeniable anchor, the literal weight dragging down this team's ultimate fate, is a defense that badly underachieved in 2025. Especially when you stop and consider the massive percentage of the salary cap that is tied up in these guys. Look, when an NFL front office dedicates top-tier financial resources to a defensive unit, they are not paying for good enough. They aren't paying for a unit that just bends but doesn't break. No way. They are paying for absolute, game-wrecking dominance. They're paying for a defensive line that can just take over a game in the fourth quarter when the offense inevitably stalls out. And last year, when the lights were at their absolute brightest, that just didn't happen. The clock is ticking so loudly right now, and the entire structural foundation of this team rests on a defense that is rapidly running out of time to justify its exorbitant cost. Section 2. TJ Watt's shocking fall. I want you to let that number linger for a second. 88. Back on June 25th, longtime CBS Sports NFL writer Pete Prisco dropped his highly anticipated annual top 100 NFL players ranking. Now, whether you love it or hate it, this list is a massive benchmark for how the league's top evaluators view current talent. And guess what? Only 2 Steelers made the cut. Cam Hayward, the seasoned veteran, came in at number 39, and TJ Watt, the guy who has arguably been the face of the entire Pittsburgh franchise for the better part of a decade, plummeted all the way down to number 88. Let that sink in. Number 88. This isn't just a slight slide down the board. This is a massive shift. Young, explosive edge rushers across the league are actively usurping his position, pushing a former Defensive Player of the Year to the very fringes of elite status. We are talking about a massive 77-spot plummet from his number 11 ranking just a single year prior. 77 spots. That is an unprecedented freefall. I mean, this is a player who has been universally recognized as one of the league's absolute best game changers, right? A generational talent from the exact second he's stepped onto an NFL field. To drop 77 spots in 1 year, that is not just natural regression. That is a shocking structural shift in how his impact is being evaluated by scouts and, more importantly, by opposing offensive coordinators. He went from being an undeniably elite force of nature, a guy opposing teams spent their entire week game planning around, to becoming a massive question mark as he enters an incredibly demanding age 32 season. And when you look at the chart, when you examine his actual on-field impact, going back to 2024 and 2025, the picture gets terrifyingly clear. Over those past 2 years combined, Watt accounted for just 18.5 sacks. But I want you to focus specifically on 2025. Only 7 sacks in the entire 2025 season. His production has practically been sliced in half, cut right down the middle. This represents the absolute worst 2-year stretch of Watt's entire professional career. And honestly, the concern goes way deeper than just the raw sack numbers. It has come with an equally sharp, alarming drop in tackles for loss and quarterback pressures. The actual mechanics of his game are changing. You see, when an edge rusher loses that explosive, terrifying first step, tackles for loss just evaporate. They disappear because they can no longer shoot the gap and set the edge against the run before the play even develops. Now, don't get me wrong here, he is still a good, functional football player. But for the staggering amount of money he commands and the linchpin role he is supposed to play in this specific defensive scheme, the Steelers don't need functional. They desperately, desperately need the dominant game wrecker of the past.
Section 3. Define father time. So what does that dominance actually look like? Well, this is TJ Watt's historical standard. This is his career 17-game average. And keep in mind, this is even when you generously include his recent 2-year statistical drop-off. The man still averages 14.5 sacks, 5 forced fumbles, and 17 tackles for loss for every 17 games played. That is insane. That is the baseline of dominance required from him. Generating 14.5 sacks in the modern NFL, that's no joke. It requires constantly beating double teams, fighting off brutal chip blocks from massive tight ends, and constantly out-leveraging elite, nimble offensive tackles snap after grueling snap. These are the monumental, physical metrics that Watt has set as his own gold standard. He hasn't reached them in the past 2 seasons, yet this is exactly, and I mean exactly, what this defense requires him to miraculously return to if they have any legitimate hopes of making a deep playoff run. But here is the grim, multi-million-dollar reality we have to face. Can a 32-year-old edge rusher actually defy history? Can he hit a benchmark of, let's just say, a slightly reduced 14 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and 15 tackles for loss? The NFL is a cruel league. It's a league where age 32 is very often the grim reaper for speed rushers. The physical toll of colliding with 320-pound behemoths for nearly a decade, it literally alters a player's biomechanics. That lethal burst diminishes. The bender on the edge gets just a little bit wider. The recovery time between Sundays stretches longer and longer. That silence you hear? That's the terrifying realization that NFL history strongly, almost completely, suggests that bouncing back to this elite level at age 32 is practically impossible. We went deep into the Pro Football Reference StatHead database to look this up, and guys, the findings are stunning. Since 1999, do you know how many players aged 32 or older have exceeded that slightly reduced trio of 14 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, and 15 tackles for loss? 2. Just 2 men in the entire modern era of football, Robert Mathis, back in 2013, and Khalil Mack in 2023. And we really have to analyze exactly why they are extreme outliers. Robert Mathis achieved his 19.5 sacks in 2013, largely because he was playing half his games on the hyper-fast artificial turf of a dome in Indianapolis. He was relying on pure, unadulterated speed on a fast track rather than pure power. And Khalil Mack, he had 17 sacks in 2023, but he heavily inflated that season total by logging an absurd 6 sacks in one single game against a completely collapsing Las Vegas Raiders offensive line. And get this, even if we generously bump those required numbers down, let's say just 12 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 14 tackles for loss. The list of players 32 or older only expands to 4 names over a 25-year span. 4. History is literally screaming at us that each passing year makes it exponentially less likely for a veteran edge rusher to climb back to the summit. TJ Watt isn't just battling offensive tackles, he is battling a historical precedent that takes absolutely no prisoners.
Section 4. The Joey Porter Standoff. Now, as if the defensive line wasn't stressful enough, let's move to the secondary. On one side of this incredibly bitter contract dispute, you have Joey Porter Jr. He's the brilliant defensive back out of Penn State, son of a former Pittsburgh defensive legend, and a player who has rapidly evolved into a premier boundary corner in the absolute meat grinder that is the AFC North. His argument for a massive market-resetting extension is totally ironclad. 0 touchdowns allowed. Let me repeat that, 0. Last season, lining up against a gauntlet of elite receivers, we're talking game breakers like Jamar Chase and Amari Cooper, he didn't allow a single touchdown in primary coverage. Not one. But on the other side, You have a notoriously frugal front office staring intently at a salary cap that is already stretched to its absolute limits. Their primary counterargument? He lacks elite accolades. So we've got a massive, high-stakes battle of wills going on here. A lockdown corner rightfully demanding his worth, completely deadlocked with a front office that is completely unwilling to reset the defensive back market. And as an impartial observer, you can completely understand both sides. It's fascinating. Longtime Pittsburgh defensive enforcer James Harrison recently went on his podcast, Debo and Joe, and dropped this absolute truth bomb about the organization's mindset. He said, one of the biggest reasons Porter Jr. can't get the number he wants is because he doesn't have the accolades of the guys who reset the corner market. The front office's logic is deeply rooted in tradition. They're looking around the league at guys like Patrick Surtain and Derek Stingley, players who have definitively solidified themselves as top-tier NFL defenders with the All-Pro hardware and the Pro Bowl selections to definitively prove it. And right now, the front office views Porter as just one tier below that absolute elite level. They absolutely want to pay him, no doubt, but they want him to concede. They want him to take less than the absolute top of the cornerback market. But here is the thing. What happens on the meticulously charted geometry of the football field tells a story that media accolades sometimes miss entirely. Drafted 32nd overall back in 2023, Porter Jr. doesn't just play some static cover 3 zone on one side of the field where he can hide. No. He is tasked with shadowing the opponent's #1 offensive option every single game. He snaps into man-to-man coverage and effectively puts the other team's best receiver on a deserted island. The strategic ripple effect this has on the entire defense is astronomical. Think about it. When a cornerback can single-handedly erase the other team's best weapon without needing help, it changes the math for the other 10 guys on defense. It allows the defensive coordinator to roll safeties freely around the formation to bait the quarterback. If Porter leaves, that entire coverage shell completely collapses. The team absolutely cannot afford to lose his specific skill set, yet they are demanding he compromise on his paycheck. It is an incredibly dangerous game of chicken happening just as the season approaches. Section 5. An undrafted secret weapon. Now let's look at a bright spot, 81.0. That is the elite Pro Football Focus grade earned by Jaylen Warren. In a league that is completely defined by draft pedigree, this is a player who was recently named one of the absolute best undrafted players currently operating in the NFL by Dyer Carger over at PFF. Going from being completely uncalled during the draft, literally overlooked by all 32 teams, to posting a staggering 81.0 overall grade, his rise from total obscurity is nothing short of incredible. And the comprehensive nature of his breakout is just staggering, especially for a late bloomer. At 27 years old, Warren just eclipsed over 1,000 rushing yards for the first time in his career. He found the end zone for 8 total touchdowns. But I want you to look closely at his reliability because this is where the magic happens. He has dropped only 2 passes on 87 catchable targets since 2024. Only 2! For an older, more stationary quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, a guy who operates with absolute precision and demands immense trust from his playmakers, a running back with that kind of flawless hand-eye coordination is the ultimate safety valve when the pocket collapses. And perhaps most critically for a quarterback in his 40s, Warren ranked 4th in pass blocking grades among 64 qualifying running backs. Guys, this is huge. When a defensive coordinator sends a 0 blitz and a free rusher comes flying up the A-gap, that can end a quarterback's season in a split second. Warren's ability to step into the hole, instantly diagnose the blitz, drop his hips, and anchor against a 240-pound charging linebacker, that makes him a crucial, indispensable contributor in every single phase of the offense. He's not just running the ball, he is protecting the franchise. The poetic irony of this roster is honestly palpable. While the highly paid, star-studded defense is actively struggling with the brutal reality of age, sharply declining metrics, and tense, bitter contract negotiations, this undrafted gem is peaking at the exact right moment. He didn't hear his name drafted, he wasn't given a massive signing bonus, but his sheer willpower to protect Rodgers, to catch reliably out of the backfield, and to grind out those brutal, tough yards between the tackles, that could literally be the key to keeping the offensive chains moving when the defense ultimately fails to get a stop. Section 6. Championship or bust. So here we are. This is the 2026 crucible for the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3 intense, overlapping narrative threads that will absolutely define the trajectory of their entire year. First, you have TJ Watt, a fading defensive legend, battling the insurmountable weight of NFL history in physical decline, trying to miraculously regain his dominance. Second, you have Joey Porter Jr., a lockdown shadow corner who fundamentally changes the geometry of the field, demanding his true financial worth in a bitter standoff with a frugal front office. And finally, you have Jaylen Warren, an overlooked, undrafted weapon, quietly transforming into the essential engine and the ultimate safety net of an aging quarterback's offense. How these three distinct collision course stories resolve will firmly dictate whether Aaron Rodgers' final ride ends in ultimate glory or absolute disaster.
So I leave you with this. When the clock finally strikes zero on the 2026 season, will this team be celebrated as resilient champions who defied insurmountable odds? Or will they become a tragic cautionary tale of a highly priced, aging roster that simply ran out of time? It's going to be a fascinating, incredibly tense season to watch unfold. That is for sure. Thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive. Remember, your channel is NFL Nexus. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button on this explainer, and comment on what you thought down below. Do you think they have enough left in the tank? Let me know. And please, support the channel by becoming a channel member today. Until next time, keep your eyes on the microscopic details because that's where the real story is always told.